welcome back to Astroboden. I did a couple of clips the other day where I basically prepared my rig for shooting the Crescent nebula before I did my modification of my DSLR. And basically I just talked about the setup and how to prepare for some issues that you can have with the mount. And then I thought, oh, why don't I just shoot the session itself, talk a little bit there. So I did, and it basically was just me in the dark talking a little bit with a red headlamp straight into the camera. So that was about as useful as a chocolate teapot, really. So I ditched that and forgot all about it. Now I found the clips on the on my computer, so I thought, well, why don't I just stitch them together and see what comes out of it. So let's take a look. Over to myself. Okay, welcome back to Astroboden. Happy New Year. Hopefully this year will show us a little bit more mercy when it comes to good weather and equipment functionality and all that. And hope for that. Hope I don't jinx myself now. Anyway, so I am preparing my old CGM mount here for an observation session hopefully tomorrow evening. So I'm just gonna show it off and rant a little bit about errors, etc. So yeah, we'll see how that comes out. Anyway, so I got the CGM here. I got my Edge HD 8-inch on here. I have my normal guide scope and my DSLR. This is a Nikon D7000. Maybe not the best astrophotography camera, really. It's not modified, for one, so this is actually one of the things that I'm doing this observation for tomorrow and the target that I'm using. But anyway, it doesn't have, there's a few versions of the DSLRs that you can't actually do the bulb setting with in USB mode. So I can only do 30-second exposures if I have a USB using my computer to control the camera, which is very weird and sucks, but didn't know that when I bought it. It works fine if you run it with a intervalometer or a solution like that, but yeah, if I knew that I couldn't control it with a USB cable, I would probably not have gone for it, even if it was quite cheap at the time. So that's something, a tip to check for when you buy a DSLR. Make sure that you can control it by the bulb setting via USB. And the bulb basically is that you have the shutter open until you release the shutter. Otherwise, it will use timer, an internal timer, and have like up to 30 seconds maybe as the maximum. So anyway, this is what we have. So we'll run with this. Yeah, so it's balanced a little bit heavy on this end, but we'll put a dew shield here as well, so we'll fine-tune all the balancing afterwards. And I'm choosing the target for tomorrow, which is the Crescent nebula. It's rather red, H alpha, etc. in there. So the thing is, I plan to shoot the target with the unmodified DSLR, and I will then modify it on camera, maybe. If I brick it and I can't tell you what went wrong, etc. This never happened, okay? I'll probably edit it. Yeah, that's the way it looks. Anyway, yeah, probably not. I'll probably, if I can make a fool of myself in a funny way, I'll probably share it because it's funny. Anyway, so that's what I'll try to do. I'll try to get the infrared cutoff filter off sensor. Found some instructions, so what could go wrong? Yeah, so anyway, that's about that. Errors then that I was going to talk about. Well, all mounts have some imperfections to them. It's all mechanics. We're trying to crack targets with maybe precision of 1 or less than 1 arc second, which is 1/3600th of a degree. It's quite high precision, and we're trying to do this with mount like this, which you can do, but there is always errors to it, and you can't come around. You have to work your way around them. One of them is periodic error. Well, this is actually something that we have technology to counter now. It's or have been having for some time. It's basically what the periodic error is that it's an imperfection in the circularity of the axis driving the mount. Let's say the worm gear shaft. I'll try to throw in a picture here of that in the way. And basically, if it's flat in a spot, just tiny bit flatter in one spot, or you have a slightly non-circular axis, if it's slightly uncircular in a way, then the speed that it drives the worm wheel with is going to change just slightly, and we will probably not be able to spot this with eye or with feel when we drive this, but the camera, or the guide camera and the imaging camera, it will see these changes in speed because of the imperfection in the worm shaft. So what we do here is that we actually guide on a star manually or with a guide program, while we have enabled a feature called periodic error correction, or similar. Some manufacturer might call it differently. But anyway, what it does is that as you are making corrections to have a star centered, the mount is tracking the changes in speed that it's been requested to make, which then means that the worm wheel or the axis is slightly imperfect in those areas. Usually you have to track for something like, in this case, 8 minutes to make sure that the worm shaft has made a full revolution, and then basically it records everything and it can counteract the error in that position of the axis when you run it later on. Simply, maybe that sounded weird, but anyway, that's the simple explanation, or the short version. So we have the technology to counter that error, and in a way, the other fault that you always have on a mount, pretty much, is backlash, and that will cause jerking motion in the tracking, basically. Or guiding, more or less. If you just have a mount here and it's just tracking and you don't have any guiding, then they say the backlash in the right direction isn't going to be very obvious, or you won't be able to see much of it, because the backlash is when the mount changes, the turning of the mount changes direction, like when it wants to compensate the movement from going one way to the other way. I'm going to show you on my Skywatcher mount here, because it has the gears exposed nicely. Okay, so this is the declination motor housing on my Skywatcher EQM35 mount, and this wheel that we see here is to the worm gear shaft, driving the worm wheel, which is underneath here somewhere, or I guess right inside the white part here. And the gears that you see here is connecting it to the motor driving this. And when we have a backlash error, what is that? Well, basically you see these between this gear and the smaller one there. You can see when I pull the manual lever here on the axis. See, there's a little bit of wiggle room there, a little wiggle. That means that the gear meshing between this wheel and the other wheel isn't perfect. And it's really hard to make these perfect because, well, they can't really be perfect. There are solutions to this, mechanical solutions, or attempt to make it better. But anyway, what it is that the the teeth on these can't actually be, it's not perfectly meshed up. And it means that if you're tracking one way of the mount, the gears on the motor will basically just push this along and it all looks perfect. But if my guiding tells me that I need to stop or go the other way because I've gone too far, then it needs to stop this and it needs to turn it the other way. And if I've been turning one way here for a while, and then I need to compensate for this low motion before I will actually start turning the mount the other way. And again, we have technology and solutions for this. Basically what you can do is that you have the guiding system try to compensate for this by running the mount one way and then stopping and turning it the other way. And it will basically measure for how long does it take before the mount starts moving in the opposite direction, more or less. And by measuring how long it takes for it to start moving in the other way, it knows how much it will add to its calculated motions to compensate for that if it needs to change direction. If we only ever need to go in one direction, then it doesn't matter. You won't see backlash if you don't use guiding, for instance, or not really, because you're only tracking in one direction. So you're only ever just pushing. These gears are only pushing that gear, and there's nothing ever to have it going to have it going like this, because it only happens if you are changing direction. Yeah, there's some other tricks to solve this, or to counter this little error that we'll look in a minute here. So, okay, so back to our main mount now. Yeah, that's right, Balti, back here again. We are gonna try to compensate for backlash in the right ascension axis, and the way we do this is, I guess most people have heard this a million times, is to balance the mount east heavy. And if you have the meridian here, south that way, north this way, then west is that side, east is that side. So I want it to be heavy on this side of the mount. Yes, Balti, what do you want? Yeah? A cookie? Yeah. We'll see about that in a minute. Anyway. So you want to have it heavy on this end, on the east side. Now it's fairly nicely balanced. So what I do is I just push up this counterweight just a touch, let's see, until we can detect just a slight unbalance on the other end. Now this means that I need to have it overweighted on the east side of the mount, which means I need to know what target I have, so I know on which side my OTA will be on. Because now I'm picturing this like I'm going to target something with my OTA on this side, and it means it's on the unbalance on the east. It's only going to work as long as the OTA stays on this side of the meridian. If we have a meridian flip, I will need to rebalance everything. So, but anyway, go to here, here we go. There we go. Slight imbalance, just slightly. Anyway, so what's happening now is that, let's see my fingers here as some axes. There we go. And this is my worm wheel. And this is my worm gear shaft, driving the worm wheel. Now, if my worm wheel wants to turn from east to west, normally, that's the way we want to track. We want to have it turning that way, yeah? Now, if I'm east heavy, that means that if this is my east to west motion, if I'm heavy on the east side, that means that if I let this go, it want to move back that way. And this is my worm gear shaft. So my worm gear wants to push it that way, but the mount wants to turn that way if it left unclutched. So it means that now there will naturally be a pressure from the worm wheel onto the worm gear teeth on the pushing end. So I'll naturally just push it along, and there will be some natural pressure on this teeth. Now, it doesn't really matter if if it's unbalanced or if it's perfectly balanced or balanced east heavy doing like this, but if we want to change direction when guiding, that means that if it's perfectly balanced, if I stop here, I need to move the teeth in the worm shaft needs to move over this empty space and get in contact with the teeth on the other side. And this motion and sudden contact will usually cause some kind of little vibration or some little jerky motion or something in the mount, and we don't want that. So what happens if we got it unbalanced is that now there's a natural pressure. It wants to go this way. So if I now want to turn my mount the other way, my worm wheel, my worm gear is going to start pulling this way, but the natural imbalance of the worm wheel on the axis means that it's going to follow the worm gear around. So I'm actually, if I'm guiding the other way, I'm not actually pushing the mount around. I'm actually just letting the mount move in its unbalanced direction. Usually you don't, I mean, it's just not going to track that way. It's just going to correct for motion, just a tiny touch. So it's actually not going to require a lot of force. It just needs a little bit of, you know, that unbalance, the weight, gravity pulling it the way I want to counter to go the opposite way of tracking. So that's east balance method for dealing with right ascension backlash error. Yeah. Okay then, so we have done our best to combat the backlash in right ascension, and since, well, it's the same mechanics really to declination, it would be nice if there was a way to combat this. Could you do that in balancing perhaps here? Well, there's a way to do it, and what you do is that when you do your polar alignments, you go for a slight imperfection in your polar alignment. And what this means is that when you start tracking on a star, you'll see that it starts drifting either north or south. And then you will simply, all you have to do is that you will tell the guide software only to send guide pulses in that direction. And this means that it will, if it drifts north, you'll send guide pulses to go south. If it is slightly on the other side, south then for instance, then it will use the natural drift to get back on track again. And that is usually quite enough, at least for well, this kind of setup. If you have big motions, then maybe the misalignment isn't enough to pull it in place quick enough for you not to have start trails, but you might actually get it back in for next sub or something. But simple thing is actually just a small misalignment in your polar alignment will cause a drift, and then you will just use that drift to only be guiding in the direction that causes to compensate for the drift. Because then, back to finger meshing here, if your drift is, if north is that way, south is that way, and if you're have a drift north, you only ever want to be guide pulses to guide it south. If this is your worm wheel, and that's your worm gear or worm shaft. So that means that you're only going to have contact on this side of the worm wheel, only be pushing it that way. So you don't gonna be jerking around in this little displacement between the teeth. You're not gonna get contact with that because you're never gonna guide that way. So that should be a nice smooth motion. You might be fancy and just try to figure out that if you do your misalignment in a certain way, if you know which way you're gonna have your drifts, if you know where your target is and how your drift is, then you can do a little imbalance here as well to make sure that you have a weight, you know, a weight displacement to ensure that the teeth that you're engaging is actually, you know, the ones that the mount want to be in contact with. But that's a bit of a trial and error. Let's work with it and see where it comes. But simple to start with is your slight mispolar alignment. Yeah. What are you doing, Balti? Huh? You bored? You bored? Well, it's astronomy here. Yeah, exciting stuff. We'll see you tomorrow night. Yeah, you'll love it.